This is so horrifying, and of course it comes out of Appalachia. Welcome back to Twisted Tidings, where I tell you a chilling holiday tale every day up until Christmas. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there's a remote village called Black Hollow, and it's known for its eerie Christmas story. Locals tell the story of the Christmas wraith, who appears when locals fail to show kindness and generosity during the holidays. The story dates back to the 1800s, when a miserly man named Silas refused to help a starving woman and her children on Christmas Eve. Silas had plenty of food and firewood, but unfortunately turned the widow away into the cold winter night. The widow and her children froze to death near the edge of town, and from that year on, strange things began to happen. Silas was found dead on Christmas morning, his body frozen in his chair, his face twisted in horror. The villagers whispered of a pale figure with glowing red eyes seen near his cabin that night. They called it the Christmas wraith, a specter born from the widow's vengeful spirit. Ever since, sightings of the wraith have been seen during harsh winters. A shadowy figure is seen drifting through the snow, peering into windows, looking for those selfish, harsh souls. Those who have seen the wraith claim to hear whispers in the wind, sounds that are ghostly, broken voices. One chilling tale comes from the 1960s, when a man was on his way back from hunting and he ignored a beggar on the side of the road. His family awoke in the middle of the night to see frost spreading across the walls, though the fire was still blazing. The hunter was found outside the next morning, his eyes wide open and his body frozen solid. They say the wraith is still wandering the mountains, watching, waiting, and making sure that no cruel act goes unpunished during the holiday season. Have you ever heard of the Christmas wraith? If so, let me know down below. That's it for today. Remember, the holidays may be merry and bright, but until then, stay warm, stay safe, and beware of what comes creeping in the cold winter nights.
You know, some people think that with the holidays upon us, it is not the time to watch horror movies, but I fully disagree, and I absolutely love this comment. So I do have a couple of holiday horror films for you. But first, if you're new here, hey, my name is Brittany. I like good horror and bad horror. I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of my holiday horror favorites, along with a couple I still need to see, but they look so good, I have to share them. First is a pretty classic recommendation. This is 2015's Krampus. So this follows a family who is really struggling from some dysfunction and some tension, and because of that, the fearsome demon Krampus has been unleashed on them. So Krampus actually comes from European folklore, and it is a evil demon that will come and take away the children who are bad. Think like the antithesis to Santa Claus, truly. So basically, this family unfortunately gets a visit from Krampus, and this whole movie is just about them trying to survive this demon coming to their home on Christmas. The thing I really love about this is that the cast is absolutely stacked and the acting is really good. It's got horror elements, it's got comedy elements, it's just exciting. It's just kind of, if you could have like a feel-good horror around this season, I think this is one for me. It's got Toni Collette, so I would definitely recommend this. Next, we have another 2015 film, A Christmas Horror Story. So this is actually an anthology that takes place in the same small town. It has 4 different short stories that are all taking place on this either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And I love a horror anthology. I love a collection of different stories because I truly believe even if not every story is for you, you're going to find something you really like. And for me, this has become just like kind of an easy comfort watch on in the background. I like the different vibes of each of the stories. And the last story always, it's got a little comical, interesting element to it. So I would recommend this. Next is 2023's It's a Wonderful Knife. This is a movie I actually just got around to watching this summer, and I was really pleasantly surprised. It follows a girl named Winnie, and she is kind of recovering after saving her town from this psychotic thriller. So we're mainly kind of seeing her a year after everything has gone down. And to be honest, her life is pretty much ruined. So she makes a wish on a shooting star that she wishes she was never born. And because of that, she is transported into a parallel universe where she is never born, where the killer was never killed, and where this town is still being overrun by him. I just thought the imagery in this was so fun. It is definitely a horror comedy movie, and Justin Long is peak weirdo in this. I don't know. I love that man in horror movies, and he did something. He's got some veneers. It's very creepy, very funny. I enjoyed it, would recommend. Next is a movie that is on my watch list because so many people have recommended it. This is 2010's Rare Exports. So this follows two children who believe that the mining or drilling project in their small town actually uncovered the tomb of Santa Claus, which is really cool. But this Santa Claus, there's something not quite right about him. And after capturing them with, I think, their father or something, they start to uncover what is actually wrong and what has been going on in this town. I'm really excited about this movie for many reasons. First of all, this is a Finnish horror film, and I really don't know if I've ever seen a Finnish horror film before, so I'm very excited about that. I also love like an evil Santa Claus arc. That's really good to me. And finally, this is a horror comedy, which is one of my favorite subgenres. So I just really feel like I'm going to love it. And so many other people have. So this is definitely on my list. Next, we have 2021's Black Friday, another movie that is at the top of my list to watch this season. This is a film that follows a group of people who are working Black Friday at a store, and we all know that is a horror story in itself. They arrive to work their midnight shift on Black Friday, and a meteor ends up crashing, and it's carrying a very evil parasite on board. And that parasite ends up infecting many of the shoppers who come in. So this ragtag group of people have to survive the night. I just have to say, one, I'm excited about this as someone who worked in retail and worked so many Black Fridays. I love a movie like this. It somehow makes me feel nostalgic and just like, ugh, I get it. It can be rough out there, even though I never had to deal with any parasites. Two, the cast lineup is insane. Bruce Campbell, Devon Sawa, like what? Michael White? What is going on? And again, this is another horror comedy, and I feel like it's just going to be a really enjoyable and good time. And around this season, when I'm watching horror, I do love something with a little comedic spin. But I'd love to know, what is on your horror holiday watch list? All right, till next time, y'all, stay spooky. Bye.
For your sake, I hope you are not alone and it's not dark where you are, because I'm going to tell you some urban legends that will probably make you piss yourself. Now, this first one actually fucking terrifies me, and I'm actually getting ready to leave for work and I'm home alone. My roommate is out of town now, so walking outside is going to be a bit of a challenge. But without further ado, let's talk about the Black-Eyed Kids. Now, their origins are pretty much a huge mystery. The first sightings were published around the late 90s. This is when people started reporting seeing them in like rural areas or even on highways, and they appear originally as lost children. So common encounters with them include they will, as I said previously, they appear as lost children, and they will typically ask you something along the lines of, hey, I'm lost, like, can I use your phone? Like, they'll knock at your door or at your car asking for a ride, saying that they're stranded, something along those lines. Now, if you don't respond or don't let them in, they will start to get more and more vicious each time. They'll just keep on trying, like, let me in. They'll just grow increasingly agitated with you. Now, they typically come at night. They'll knock on doors. They'll knock on your window. All sorts of shit. And one thing that people have tended to like notice with these children is how their skin tone, it's pretty pale.
in contrast to like average people, of course, and of course their black eyes. Like there's no white in their eyes, it's just completely black. Now, no one has ever lived to tell the tale if they end up letting these children in. It's reported that they are either cryptids or some type of alien human hybrid, but as I said before, their origins are pretty much unknown. Now, this next one is a certified hood classic. It's Bloody Mary. If you don't know what that is, then I don't know what to tell you. But this was a huge part of my childhood back in elementary school, and it actually triggered my fear of mirrors. I hate mirrors. I will try and cover them as much as possible. I try not to have them in my room and so on. Like, they actually terrify me. And I remember in elementary school, a couple girls thought it was funny to lock us in the bathroom, turn off the lights, and start chanting her name. And that just pushed my phobia even more. But let's get into the backstory. So this was actually a divination ritual in like historic times. Basically, so a woman would walk backwards up a flight of stairs with a candle lit, and when she would look into the mirror, she would be able to see her future husband's face. And sometimes she would see a skull, kind of symbolizing the Grim Reaper, basically meaning she would die before she would be able to get married. And then eventually, Bloody Mary came about. In elementary school, what I was told was that you just had to chant her name 3 times in a dark room in front of a mirror, and then she would appear and kill you. But allegedly, you have to chant her name 13 times with a candle, and this will cause an apparition to appear. She'll either be nice or demonic. Either one. And if you want to test it out, be my guest. Now, this next urban legend is a bit lighter. It's the story of Herobrine. This is for all my gamers out there who grew up on Minecraft, because I remember looking up YouTube videos summoning Herobrine, and I would try and do the same thing on my little iPad at the time back in like the early 2010s. Sorry, my eyes are like watering. And it was just such a huge like phenomenon at the time. Like, you just had to be there. So Herobrine was allegedly Notch's dead brother, and he would haunt single-player worlds. Now, what makes this so creepy is if you've ever played Minecraft alone, it can be creepy. Like, you're just in this vast world. Sometimes the ambient music, especially when you're in the cave systems, it can be actually terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. So it's no wonder why this used to scare us so much. Now, the first sighting of Herobrine was actually reported by a 4chan user, and one key thing that players would notice if Herobrine was in their world was trees would be like, how do I explain it? They would be like missing in a sense, like parts of trees would be missing as if someone was already there. I don't know if you know this, but if you've ever played Minecraft, when you cut down trees and stuff, it's pretty apparent. The blocks don't really grow back, or at the time they didn't grow back. So this was like a key thing, and the player spotted Herobrine in the fog, like in the distance, and Herobrine typed out stop and then vanished as quickly, almost as quickly as the player saw him. And this kind of sparked, you know, the ongoing Herobrine theory. And then came the rituals and YouTube videos to summon him in your game. I'm like low-key scared to go outside now, because after I'm done with this, I'm like heading out to go into work. And I'm just like, my car is like right in the driveway, but I'm just like, I'm still fucking like terrified to walk out, and I need to pee as well. And now I'm scared to pee. Like, now you guys can see how much of a scaredy cat I really am when I'm alone. And I'm like actually scared. A lot of these, like, this video actually feels nostalgic because this was stuff that I grew up with as far as urban legends, and they actually, like, a lot of the phobias I have now stem from these urban legends. All right, we're done. This is the finished look. I like to keep it simple for work because I'm on my toes, but a lot of patients like compliment my eyes whenever I have this type of makeup on because it just enhances them and enlarges them because I have hazel colored eyes. So I kind of want my ego boosted this morning. But anyways, you guys have a great day.
So I have another spooky story for you. This one is about superstitions. Now, I like to think that we're all aware of the one that says that if you break a mirror, you're gonna have 7 years of bad luck. And this is the premise of our story. So our story for the night starts in the suburbs. There's a woman named Lauren who recently purchased a house, and Lauren has her best friend Michelle over, helping to renovate, clean up, paint, and just do all of the things that are needed to get a house together. So our story starts in Lauren's master bedroom. Lauren and her friend Michelle are in there painting a wall, and Lauren ends up having to move this rather heavy mirror off the wall in order to get behind it to paint. So she's taking the mirror off of the wall, and her friend Michelle can see that she's struggling. She's asking her if she needs help moving this mirror. Of course, Lauren declines, and all of a sudden, Lauren drops the mirror and it shatters everywhere. Immediately after this happened, Lauren goes to get a broom so she can clean up the mess and get back to work. But as she's going out of the room to get the broom, her friend Michelle stops her right in her tracks. Her friend seems a little bit frantic, and she tells her that she does not need to clean up this mirror. In fact, she needs to leave it on the floor as it is. Now, Lauren's looking at her friend Michelle like she's crazy, and she asked her why she says this. And Michelle responds to her that if she continues to move the mirror pieces, she is going to endure that 7 years of bad luck. But if she decides to leave the mirror on the ground undisturbed, then she'll only suffer 7 hours of bad luck. Now, Michelle is really insistent on this. In fact, Michelle is willing to cancel the date that she has that evening to stay with Lauren, knowing that the bad luck she's about to experience might be quite major, despite the shorter amount of time. Now, Lauren is looking at her friend still like she's crazy, but why take the risk? So after hearing this, Lauren decided to humor her friend and leave the glass on the ground for 7 hours. Now her friend again asked if she should stay with her tonight just to make sure everything was fine, but Lauren didn't want her to miss out on her date and she encouraged her friend to go. Now our story moves by pretty fast because right after she broke the mirror, she set a timer for 7 hours. Shortly after this, her friend would go home to get ready for her date, and Lauren was left to chill out in her home. Now, the first 3 hours of the night went off pretty well. There was nothing wrong, nothing out of place. So Lauren decided she would write a letter to her mom while she waited for the time to run out. So while she's sitting at the countertop writing this letter to her mom, the ink in her pen starts to leak out and spills all over her. It gets on the letter, it gets all over her hands, and so she walks over to the sink to turn the water on, and the water's not working. Now, she just had the plumber in there like 2 days ago and everything was fine. So she attempts to wipe her hands off with the paper towel, and the paper towel roll breaks and there's paper towel all over the floor because it spun off of the roll. Now, in Lauren's mind, this is a little weird, but ultimately no biggie, until she bends down and the lights in her house go off. This is when she starts to get a bit afraid. Now, Lauren decides to head down to the basement, but before she does that, she lights a candle so she can see in her house. And as she heads downstairs to the basement to look at the circuit breaker, she's got this candle with her. So just for good measure, Lauren decides she's going to move the master switch. So as she's reaching for the switch and connects with it, it gives her a very powerful jolt of electricity. So much so that she drops the candle she's holding into a bucket of cleaning detergent that she had laying on the floor. Now, this immediately causes the bucket to catch fire. Luckily for Lauren, though, she was able to put the bucket fire out rather quickly and decided it was time to head back upstairs to get more candles. Now, because Lauren was new to the neighborhood, she didn't know that there had been a neighborhood prowler out that was breaking into homes at that time. So as she's heading back upstairs into her kitchen, there's somebody moving across the window that lines the basement. Now, she's not aware of this person, but as she gets into the kitchen and begins to light this candle, she sees something walk past her window upstairs. This person is trying to get into this window and she's panicking. So the first thing she decides to do is abandon the candle and go check her front door, which was unlocked. Now, luckily for Lauren, she managed to get there a little bit before the person trying to break in got there, and she was able to lock the door. Now, by this point, Lauren is in an absolute panic and she runs back to the kitchen to call 911. But again, the phone's not working because the power's out. So the only thing she does is grab the timer to look down at it, and she sees that there's 2 minutes on the clock left before the 7 hours is up. And she's hoping beyond all hope that her friend is right and that it's only 7 hours. So by now, Lauren is terrified, and because she was almost the victim of a break-in, she decides to go and check all of the doors in her house. So she goes back down to the basement, checks to make sure the windows are locked. She heads back upstairs again. She knows the front door is locked, and all of a sudden, the lights in her house come back on and the timer dings, so Lauren feels relieved. The power's back on, the phones are working, and the only thing she's got left to do is go upstairs and get this mirror up immediately. As Lauren approaches her bedroom, she realizes that she forgot the broom to clean up the mirror shards, and so she goes back out to get it, and all of a sudden she hears something rattling outside of her bedroom window. Now, as far as she's concerned, the 7 hours of bad luck is over, so why is somebody still trying to break into her house? So she's standing there, frozen in fear, and all of a sudden, the window opens and a man walks in. Now, seeing this, Lauren doesn't know what to think, and she's petrified. She's frozen in fear, and the man starts getting closer to her. Now, Lauren attempts to run away, but the man lunges towards her, and as he does so, he falls. He trips on the mirror frame that had broken earlier. Now, as he gets up to approach Lauren again, he starts to stumble backwards. And Lauren is a bit confused in this moment until she looks down at his torso and sees that there's a shard of glass implanted into his stomach. And the man at this point has decided that it's over. He creeps back out of the window. Now, taking this opportunity, Lauren immediately goes to call the cops. As she's calling them, all she can think about is how the glass that was meant to harm her earlier ended up saving her life. Anyways, I want to know what you guys are thinking. Could it be a superstition come to life? Maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or maybe this was just a coincidence in a series of unfortunate events? Leave your thoughts in the comments though. Let me know what you think, and stay safe this Friday 13th.
Are you ready for another creepy side of Christmas story? This one comes from Iceland in the mountains. Gorilla, also known as the Christmas monster. She has an unsatisfied hunger for bad kids. He is always grumpy and kind of scary looking. She takes bad children and puts them in a sack and takes them home and cooks them in a stew where she eats them. She's not alone. She has a couple of people with her. In fact, she has 13 sons with her. These 13 sons are called the Yule Lads, and they are known to be the pranksters of Christmas for the month of December. But she also has somebody else with her. Well, I don't know if he's with her, but she's been married 3 times, and her third husband, Lapello, lives in a land called the Demiurge. Now, what is that place? It's a lava pit land, where it is said that when Lucifer fell from heaven, that's where he landed. So nothing but good things happening there. Now, there's still one more thing that travels with her. And that is the Yule Cat. And the Yule Cat is giant. Huge. And the Yule Cat isn't limited to only eating bad children. He can eat whatever he wants. Unless you got new clothes for Christmas. Then he can't eat you. Did you get new clothes for Christmas? Let me know.
That Christmas tree. Henry squinted at the classified ad in the old newspaper he found beneath a stack of unopened mail. The ad showed a single photograph, a sleek black Christmas tree with shimmering crimson ornaments. Brings loved ones back for the holidays, it promised. It sounded impossible, absurd, but it was late December, and grief sat heavy on his heart since his wife's passing in early spring. Against all common sense, he called the number. A whispery voice answered. By that evening, the tree had arrived. The thing was black as ink, its needles glistening with an oily sheen. He set it up in the corner of his living room, where they'd always placed their bright green furs. The ornaments were already on it. No tinsel, no lights, just dark red bulbs that seemed to pulse faintly as he breathed. When he drew close, the ornaments showed reflections, not of the room, but of another time. He saw himself as a younger man, standing in the kitchen with his wife Lucy, flour dusting both their noses as they baked gingerbread. Another ornament flashed a memory of her singing carols softly, head tilted back, eyes bright. Night by night, the scenes intensified. He watched their first Christmas morning together, the blush on Lucy's cheeks when he proposed beneath the mistletoe, the tearful laughter they shared during their last holiday before her illness took hold. Each memory winked out as soon as he pulled away, leaving him hungry for more. On Christmas Eve he awoke to a single word spoken in the hush of darkness. Henry. He staggered into the living room. The black tree seemed taller, its branches stretching like skeletal arms. Beneath it stood Lucy, or something like Lucy. Her eyes were duller, and her voice echoed as if spoken from the bottom of a well. Still, her smile was just as he remembered, her hair shining in the faint moonlight. I've come home, Henry. He fell to his knees, sobbing with joy and dread all at once. But as he reached for her hand, her flesh felt oddly cold, not like the warm woman he had cradled all those winter nights. Her voice took on a strange timbre, as if mingled with something unseen in the gloom. The tree's gift does not come free. It opened a door where my soul was trapped. Now it demands another soul to keep me here. You must choose, Henry. He recoiled. Fear twisted in his stomach. The advertisement's promise left out the price. He backed away, stumbling over presents he bought only to keep tradition alive. Lucy, he stuttered, but the shape of her flickered, wavered, distorted into something hollow-eyed and hungry. Someone must take my place in that dark place, she hissed. Someone you know, someone you love, or I fade again. Tears burned hot on his cheeks. He realized the awful truth. To reclaim her warmth, he would have to condemn another. As he hesitated, her form began to fade, her eyes darkening into empty pits. He could nearly see the black branches behind her ghostly face. The clock struck midnight. Outside, a neighbour hummed a holiday tune, unaware of the choice that weighed like a millstone around Henry's heart. He reached for an ornament and watched a perfect memory of Lucy smiling. The scene collapsed into ash. The tree shimmered, demanding an answer, and Henry stood alone, trembling, contemplating whose life he'd steal away so he could have her, this twisted version of her, back for one more night. In the silence, the black needles seemed to whisper, "Choose."
It was Christmas Eve night, 1 in the morning. I was in our den watching TV because I always like to stay up extra late on Christmas Eve. To make things more festive and cozy feeling, it was during a snowstorm. I left the window open and the backyard light on just so I could also have the view of the snow in the backyard. I was focused on the TV at the moment, but through my peripheral vision, I thought I could briefly see something in the backyard. I turned to the window, but besides the falling snow, there was nothing going on out there. Still, I got up and went to the window just to be sure. Nothing. I sat back down on the couch, but now I was constantly checking the window to see if anything was outside. About 10 minutes later, I calmed down and forgot about it and reverted my full attention back to the movie. Then I heard, loud and clear, the backyard gate slam shut. Now I almost knew someone was back there. I slipped on my shoes and a jacket and went out to the backyard to check it out. There were boot marks in the snow, leading from one gate across the yard to the other gate. I was not feeling brave enough to follow them, so I went back inside. As I was taking off my boots and jacket, I saw a track of wet, muddy snow on the den carpet, leading from the office to the hallway that led to the living room. That was also the way to my parents' room. First, I had to go to the office to see how they broke in, so I followed the boot marks to the office without turning on any lights to make my presence known. I was expecting to see one of the windows busted open, but everything was intact. Then I realized the boot marks didn't start in this room. They ended in this room. I slowly lifted my head up to the garage door in the corner of the room. It was open, and right under the doorway there was someone in a winter coat, jeans, and boots, squatting down as if trying to hide, back facing me, but his head turned to look at me. I stood there with my mouth open in horror for a few seconds before I ran for it to my parents' room, screaming the whole way there. I got my dad to come out as quickly as possible, and on our way to the garage together, we heard the actual garage door opening. By the time we got there, the intruder was gone. Realistically, we could have followed his boot marks, but who knows how far he'd gotten by that point. We found out he broke in through an unlocked living room window. Just goes to show, if somebody has intentions of breaking into your house, they'll find a way, which is why you should always lock all your doors and windows.
Santa's last stop. They always told Ellie Santa wasn't real, but the man standing in her living room on Christmas Eve proved them wrong, just not in the way she hoped. The night had started like any other. Ellie had carefully arranged the milk and cookies on the coffee table and hung her stocking with care. Her parents kissed her goodnight, their footsteps fading as she drifted to sleep, clutching her teddy bear. But the jingling bells woke her. Soft at first, like wind chimes in the distance, they grew louder and heavier, joined by a sound that didn't belong. Slow, deliberate thuds, like boots trudging across snow. Except these thuds weren't outside, they were inside. Ellie sat up, heart racing, the glow of the Christmas lights painting her room in flickering colours. Sliding from her bed, she crept to her door, cracking it open just enough to peer into the hallway. That's when she saw him. The figure was massive, draped in a red coat torn at the seams, dark stains blooming across the fabric. He dragged a bulging sack behind him, the coarse material scraping against the floor. Ellie's breath caught in her throat as the sack twitched. Something inside was moving. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but then the figure turned, and she saw his face, or what should have been a face. Hollow black pits stared back at her where eyes should be, and his grin stretched far too wide, revealing jagged, yellowed teeth. Ellie stumbled back, but the floor creaked under her weight. His head snapped toward her, and the grin widened. "Awake, little one," he growled, his voice like gravel grinding against metal. "I love when they're awake." She bolted, her bare feet barely making a sound against the wooden floor. Behind her, the sack scraped faster, the bells on his belt jangling as he moved. She dove under her bed, her heart hammering in her chest. The room fell silent, except for the faint jingle of bells and the whisper of his boots. Then came his voice, low and mocking. "Ellie, come out! Come out! You'll make a fine ornament." She pressed her hands over her mouth to stifle a sob as his footsteps circled the bed. A clawed hand reached down, gnarled fingers scraping the floorboards just inches from her face. That's when her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. An old sleigh bell her brother had shoved under the mattress years ago. Her brother had always told her the bell was special, though she hadn't believed him at the time. "It's magic," he'd said. "It'll keep the bad things away." Ellie clutched the bell as the figure crouched, his hollow eyes meeting hers. His grin split his face in two. "Think that little toy can stop me?" Without thinking, Ellie shook the bell with all her strength. The sound wasn't the cheerful chime she expected. It was a piercing, bone-deep note that made the walls shudder. The sack burst open, and ghostly figures spilled out, children with pale faces and wide, hollow eyes, their voices rising in a mournful wail. The man, no, the thing, screamed, clawing at the shadows as they swarmed him. They dragged him toward the fireplace, his twisted form shrinking as he was pulled into the flames. But just before he disappeared, he turned to Ellie one last time. "You've sent me away," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice, "but now it's your turn." The room fell silent. The sack lay empty, the children's voices gone. Ellie sat trembling, the sleigh bell still clutched in her hand. When morning came, the town celebrated Ellie's survival. No one could explain the strange happenings of the night, and no one wanted to. But Ellie knew the truth. She could feel it every time she looked at her reflection in the fireplace glass. Her eyes weren't her own anymore. "Merry Christmas to all," she whispered, her grin stretching just a little too wide.
I want to tell you a true ghost story that happened to me right here in my home at Christmas time. It's probably no surprise at all that I have a house ghost. Yes, I have a house ghost. And he's actually the person who built the house back in 1936. He is amazing and he's really helpful and protective. And sometimes he likes to go around the house at like 3 in the morning and make sure the doors are locked. It's really weird. I've checked this before. I've left the locks unlocked just to see, and he always locks them. So I want to tell you what happened one night when we encountered each other. So this particular night, he was over here locking the doors. As you can see, here it is, and doing what he usually does, but he was a little louder than he usually is. So I was like, what's going on? Let me go check. So in my house at Christmas, I have 2 of these bad boys, and I love them. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but basically they have 2 modes. One is just lights, which you see here, and you can turn them on and off. And then the other plays music, and that one is a sensor. So I go out at like 3 in the morning whenever this is happening, because it's a little louder than usual. And I'm like, what's going on? Just to make sure it's not an actual person. And As soon as I do that, it seems that I've left the sensor on and I trip it. And the whole nutcracker goes off with the sounds and the lights and everything. At this point, there's like a rush of wind. And it goes straight through this window, straight through this kitchen window. I rush after it to look out the window, and I see and I hear that rush of wind sets off this massive wind chime that I have. This is a very heavy wind chime. There was no wind, and it went crazy. So I totally realized at that point what had happened. The nutcracker went off as Larry, my house ghost, was doing his rounds, and it scared him. And he flew out of the house, took off out of the house. And my reaction was, well, not great. Like, it was funny. So I laughed. And he did not appreciate that so much. So it was at least a week until I apologized and he came back into the house to lock the doors again.
Sorry for the jump scare. Merry Christmas, I guess. It's that time of year again, and my father is haunting our house once again. For those that don't know, my father passed away in our house about 15 years ago, and been haunting it ever since. At first it was little things like showing up in our dreams, very vivid dreams. Me, my mom, and my brother all had around the same time. And we always thought our house was haunted anyways, because there used to be voices calling to me and my brother from the garden. Makes it sound like we're living in an old Victorian horror movie. It's always been just kind of chill thing. So we were never like, oh, we should exorcise the house. And especially once we realized like, oh, now dad is haunting us in the house. He also flooded the downstairs one time, which it just seemed like something he would do. And he was silly like that. But the main issue, my main issue, is this. You see this terrifying demon right here? My mom bought this at CVS like 6 or 7 years ago. And it has a crack right here. That crack was in it before she bought it. And when she bought it, she was like, oh, it's so sweet. It's so cute. Because your dad was blind in that eye. And I was like, why'd you bring it home? And why is it the same height as me? And why is it a statue, but it has a soft, squishy body? I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I don't like it. So yeah, we bring it out every year around Thanksgiving. And my mom will always be like, bring your father out of the garage. Ah. And then we'll put it up somewhere in the house. Usually either the front window like it is now, or right next to the Christmas tree in the living room. Here's the thing. It's not supposed to move, but it moves. It always turns around. Sometimes 180 degrees, which is terrifying, just slightly. Which may be worse. I don't know. Because then you feel like it's looking at you. And I'm 98% sure that my kids aren't messing with it because everybody is like freaked out about it when it happens, except for my mom. My mom thinks it's hilarious, but I don't think she's doing it either. Here's a conversation we were having about it.
It was a terrifying revelation. Well, no, it was all in that agreement your father and I had. What was? Not even haunted? Well, the agreement was that because people say, oh, there is no such thing as afterlife. That's what we just say to make ourselves feel better. It's all a fraud. And so we said, no, you know what we're going to do? Whoever goes first is going to come back and let us know there is life on the other side. Why would you make that agreement? And why does it have to happen every Christmas? The ghost of Christmas past. It's every Christmas. And where's the ghost of Christmas present? Don't call more ghosts. We don't want more ghosts. Well, you know, I don't. Some people are just.
It was Christmas Eve, and snow blanketed the small town of Evergreen. Lisa, a night shift worker at the local morgue, gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove her old sedan through the icy streets. The radio played muffled Christmas carols, but festive spirit was the furthest thing from her mind. She was late for her shift, and her boss had made it clear that tardiness would cost her the job. The streets were eerily quiet, and Lisa was distracted, mentally rehearsing her excuses for being late. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. She slammed on the brakes, but the car skidded on the ice, colliding with the figure before coming to a stop. Panicking, Lisa jumped out of the car and found a man lying in the snow, his face pale and lifeless. Her breath hitched as she realized he wasn't moving. She looked around, desperate for help, but the street was deserted. With shaking hands, she whispered, I'll call for help. But when she reached for her phone, a chilling voice whispered from behind her, "It's too late." Lisa spun around, but no one was there. The man's body was gone. Trembling, she stumbled back into her car and sped away, her heart pounding in her chest. She told herself it wasn't real, just her imagination playing tricks on her. When she arrived at the morgue, she was greeted by the usual sterile silence. She clocked in, trying to push the incident out of her mind. But as she entered the cold storage room, she froze. There, on one of the metal slabs, was the man she had hit. Lisa staggered backward, her stomach twisting in knots. His lifeless eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, but then, as if summoned by some unseen force, his head turned toward her. "Why did you leave me?" he rasped, his voice hollow and cold. Lisa screamed and ran out of the room, but the morgue's halls seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning in impossible directions. Whispers filled the air, voices overlapping in an eerie chorus. Coward. Murderer. You can't escape the truth. As she turned a corner, she was met with a crowd of spectral figures, their faces pale and translucent. They were the dead from the morgue, their eyes full of sorrow and rage. One by one, they stepped forward, recounting their stories, lives cut short by careless drivers, cold-hearted decisions, and untold truths. Then the man she hit emerged from the crowd, his presence commanding and chilling. "Do you want to know the truth?" he asked. Lisa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. But the dead would not let her look away. They forced her to relive the moment, the headlights, the impact, and her cowardice. But this time the vision didn't end there. The man revealed his life. A father rushing home to deliver gifts to his daughter. A single moment had stolen his chance to see her smile one last time. Lisa collapsed to her knees, sobbing, as the man's ghost loomed over her. "You left me to die," he whispered, his voice full of pain. "Now, you must face the consequences." The morgue grew colder, and Lisa's breath turned to mist. The figures began to close in on her, their icy hands reaching for her. She screamed, but no sound came out. The last thing she saw was the man's face, inches from hers, as he whispered, "Merry Christmas." Lisa was found the next morning, lying cold and lifeless on the floor of the morgue. The cause of death was ruled a heart attack, but some say her face bore an expression of sheer terror. And on the icy streets of Evergreen, a new ghost joined the others, forever reliving the moment when one decision changed everything. To this day, drivers passing through Evergreen on Christmas Eve claim to see spectral figures on the side of the road, warning them to slow down and think twice before leaving the truth behind.